The State of America 2022. How positive or negative are you about America's future? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt discussion. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And before we address that issue, and before we get into my great guests that I have today on Bold and Blunt, I want to give a heads up that if you would like to subscribe to Bold and Blunt, go to edify.app/podcast. That's the place to go to if you're looking for faith-based podcasts. Edify. It's where all your faith-based podcasts are offered. You can also get Bold and Blunt, of course, at WashingtonTimes.com. And I would be very happy to have you as a regular subscriber to Bold and Blunt, which is also offered on all the normal, usual places where you get your podcasts. So are you positive or negative about America's future? If you pay attention to polls, well then chances are you're negative about the outlook for America. This from Pew Research in late January, this headline, Americans broadly negative about the state of the nation. But most see a better year ahead. Well, you can look at that in two ways. Maybe most see a better year ahead because of the eternal optimism of Americans in general. We are a nation that has a spirit of liberty that cannot be killed. So optimism is in our DNA. Or you can look at that headline in sort of the glass is half empty type of view, which would say that you're optimistic about the year ahead because you think that we're already down in the dumps so low that we can only go up. So let's look at some of the numbers of this poll. Facing successive waves of the coronavirus and an uncertain economy, Pew starts. The public enters 2022 largely dissatisfied about the way things are going in the United States and fearful about the state of the nation. The big takeaway there is fearful. Americans in a land where rights come from God, not government, in a land where religious freedom based on love for God was the founding reason for the country. America, where a nation of believers in a higher power have gone on to do such great things, to raise the country to a state of global dominance in so short of time. In a country like this, in a country that Ronald Reagan described as a shining city upon a hill, whose beacon light guides freedom-loving people everywhere. In a country like that, to be described as fearful, for the people to be described as fearful, that's unacceptable. And that's the big takeaway from this poll. Americans are fearful right now. And they're fearful, filled with fear, largely because politicians, bureaucrats, and their friends in the media have pushed a fearful narrative for over 2 years. Look around in America right now. Look around at the nation's youth, at the nation's next generation of leaders. And what do you see? Face masks. Face masks that just announce to the world, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to live a normal life as God intended me to live. I'm afraid to remove this covering from my face because the government has ingrained in my mind and in my heart that this is the way to beat a disease, a virus, that this is the way to stay safe and secure. I'm afraid to disobey what my government has told me to do for 2+ years. That's not the America I know. That's not the America that founding fathers gave us. And you know what? That's not the America that has been used mightily by God to spread the good news of liberty, of individualism, of rights coming from God throughout the world. That's not the America that every man, woman, and child around the world one day hopes to visit or maybe even live in. So what's going on in America right now? Well, leadership has a great deal to do with it. And if you look at the leadership in the White House right now, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Team Biden, it's not messages of strength that they're sending. It's not messages of comfort. It's not good leadership narratives that they're sending out there into the world across this nation. It's narratives that bring to mind adjectives like feckless, bumbling, stumbling. It's narratives like that that are not only emboldening America's enemies and nations that are hostile to America, but it's narratives like that, it's adjectives like that that are actually fueling the continuance of fear among American citizens. As 2022 begins, low levels of national satisfaction exist among both parties, Pew reports. Most people in America are dissatisfied with the way the country is going. 78% in January 2022 say they are dissatisfied with the way things are headed in America. 21% are satisfied. A majority of U.S. adults, 61%, are still optimistic that this new year will be better than the previous year. But look at what's happening. Look at what's taken place in between January, when this poll was conducted, and now March. We're whispering our way into World War III, largely because the White House, the administration that we have right now, is so weak that countries like Russia, China, Iran are just rubbing their hands in glee, looking for ways to exploit, looking for ways to take advantage, and Russia already has. What Russia is doing in Ukraine right now would not have happened under Donald Trump. And we know this to be true because for 4 years, it didn't happen under Donald Trump. And yet, if you go back in time to pre-Donald Trump, Russia, with Crimea under Barack Obama, did occur. So it's almost like Russia is just waiting for a Democrat to occupy the White House in order to stretch its wings and aggress across countries that are supposed to be sovereign. And now we have China with the big fingernail bite of what's going to happen with Taiwan. And you know, if you live in Taiwan right now, that you are on pins and needles because you're watching as the President of the United States cares more about the ice cream cone flavor he's going to have at lunch that day than he does about assuring allies around the world that America stands behind these allies. Can you say Afghanistan? It's not hyperbole to say that this White House is clueless when it comes to foreign policy and military matters, because we have the example right in front of our faces of Afghanistan, where they were feckless, where they honestly allowed innocent lives to be taken from this earth because of their fecklessness. And we don't talk about Afghanistan anymore because now we have Russia and Ukraine. And there's also things like inflation and supply chain issues that this administration, Pete Buttigieg, where are you, haven't solved, even though they promised that they would do a much better job than Donald Trump. Back to Pew. Public satisfaction with national conditions remains low. Just 21% say they are satisfied with the way things are going in the country, while 78% are dissatisfied. Skipping down, today only small shares of both Democrats and Republicans and those who lean to each party say they are satisfied with the way things are going, though Democrats are nearly 3 times as likely as Republicans to have a positive view. But before you read into that and say, oh, of course, look at the numbers. 29% of Democrats say they have a positive view of the way things are going in this country versus only 10% of Republicans. In other words, Democrats, by and large, think this country's going to the pot too. For most of Donald Trump's presidency, of course, majorities of Republicans were satisfied with national conditions, compared with fewer than a quarter of Democrats. And here's the problem. Democrats have become the party of anything but Donald Trump. They've become the party of buck Donald Trump policy. And so they don't even consider anything that Donald Trump did during his 4 years as being positive for this nation. They come into office, whether in the White House or in Congress, and they want to do a clean sweep of all things Donald Trump, without even first taking the time to consider whether what Donald Trump did for this nation, the policy they're sweeping away, was positive for the country. They hate Donald Trump more than they love America. They hate the agenda of Donald Trump more than they love Americans. And so they're willing to sacrifice good things for America, positive things for American citizens, so long as it wipes all things Donald Trump off the face of the earth. And if you're a supporter of Donald Trump, if you're a supporter of Donald Trump policies, they want to wipe all existence of you from the face of the earth as well. It's not about what's best for America with Democrats. It's about wiping away all evidence of Donald Trump, Make America Great Again, America First agenda, and about bolstering Democrats' own power, prestige, influence agendas here in America and around the world. It's about the globalist agenda first. It's not America first, it's global government first. That's where Democrats' mindsets are. And that's why we have such feckless leadership coming from this White House, because their mission truly is to crumble the Constitution, to abolish all that's great about this nation, and to sell out America's resources, including American citizens, because citizens to Democrats are simply resources, not creations of God with souls and missions on earth. Democrats' mission is to completely crumble the Constitution, sell out America's resources, and usher in this new, can we say, world order, where it's a global top-down approach to government, and there are only a few elites at the top. Look around. Look at what's happening. Go back in time and listen to my Bold and Blunt shows on the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, that the left, oh so strongly tried to deny was even a thing. Oh so strongly tried to put in the people's minds of this nation that it was a conspiracy theory. But all you have to do is go to WEF.org and look at the Great Reset and see what's happening. Look at what's taking place in the world. Look at how this administration is basically either directly or indirectly selling out all that's great about America to overseas entities, to some other governments. Keystone Pipeline, what do we need that for? We can just buy our oil. We can just buy our energy from other nations, whether those nations are friends of America or not. That's what this administration did. We were energy independent under Donald Trump. Whoosh, gone in a flash under Joe Biden. It's not that Democrats are stupid. It's that they are strategically selling out America to global forces who are hostile to America's individualism and ideal of God-given rights. And they're hoping you don't notice. They're hoping you don't talk about it. Because if you do talk about it, you get booted from social media. These aren't things taking place in a bubble. These are things taking place as part of a strategic overall plan of leftists in America working with leftists around the world in certain elitist circles to usher in a new system of governance. Thank you, Joe Biden. My guest today, Congressman Scott Perry, has a few things to say about the Joe Biden administration. He is the leader of the House Freedom Caucus. He was just elected to that spot in January, taking over for Andy Biggs. And he's on today, Representative Scott Perry, Congressman Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, to talk about the White House, Team Biden, direction of the GOP, Ukraine, Russia, and a whole host of things. So, Congressman Scott Perry, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity.
So let's talk briefly about the Joe Biden administration. What do you think the most damaging thing Joe Biden's administration has done for America in this past year?
Well, it's hard to...
Yeah, I know.
You said the most dangerous. I think probably the most dangerous is twofold. The United States war on its own energy, or our energy policy, has cataclysmic effects that go far beyond the gas pump, and then the rhetoric coming out of the Biden administration, whether it's how we talked about telegraphing what we're going to do in Afghanistan, to what he said during the humiliating withdrawal and surrender in Afghanistan, to what he said to Ukraine right before Russia went in, to what he's telegraphed to the Chinese, to Iran, to North Korea. The rhetoric's important. People complained about the delivery of Donald Trump, but it kept people, that rogue nations and dangerous despots, from stepping out. And now you see that the change in tone and the change in what has been said has emboldened every single one of them to try and realize their dreams in the next, during the next 3 years of this presidency, for sure.
Let's talk about energy independence for a second, because it was so fast how we went from, under Donald Trump, a nation strong on its own energy and resources, to a country under Joe Biden that now relies on hostile nations to fuel our country. What would you do right now in the White House to bring us back to energy policy that is strong and secure for America?
Well, first of all, it's an absolute and actual, just complete reversal, of course, from everything the Biden administration did regarding the Trump administration policy. So Keystone, Anwar, leases on federal lands, continental shelf, natural gas permitting, but then to go further, more allowance and siting of more pipelines. We can't even sell Pennsylvanian-made gas, Ohio gas, to New England, and to go further, because of things like the 100-plus-year-old Jones Act, we can't even sell our own gas using ocean-going vessels to our own country, because none of those vessels are made in this country, and so it prohibits us from doing that. So we would make policy changes to things like the Jones Act. We would make policy changes that disallow the use of rail for natural gas. We would make policy changes regarding pipelines to allow for the use of those, but we would go much, much further. We would also, if it were my administration, use the power of the Treasury and the SEC to rein in the large financiers like BlackRock, Morgan Chase, who are now fully woke and have subscribed to this ESG policy, which disallows them from investing in United States energy. And people don't realize it right now, but that is having a huge effect. We have the know-how at the present time, and we have the capability, but the producers are, A, dying on the vine, and B, just going out because literally they can't get the financing to provide the energy that the United States needs. The United States is an energy economy, and oh, by the way, The war in Ukraine isn't over windmills and solar panels. It's over energy, reliable energy like oil and gas. China is increasing its use of coal as we speak because of the volatile energy market. People have been bought into, and the Biden administration has been worshiping at the altar of the Green New Deal. And this is what you get for these things. Not only your higher price at the pump, not only your higher price heating bills over this winter, but moving on, you're going to find it increasingly more expensive to drive because they literally, when I say they, the left, the radical left, literally doesn't want you owning or driving a personal vehicle. They want you on mass transit if you're moving at all, and if you do decide to have the temerity to drive a personally owned vehicle, they demand that you use an electric vehicle. And oh, by the way, at the same time, they're reducing our capacity in the United States to produce electricity, because what they want to be able to do then is to monitor and control your use of that electric vehicle by limiting the times you can drive it, the distance you can drive it, and they literally will have the capacity to shut it off if you're going to move beyond what they think is appropriate for you. That's where the world is headed right now under the leftist policies, and it's way, way, way beyond time that the United States wake up to this and change policies. This endangerment finding regarding CO2 emissions needs to be reversed. It is all based on zero science. It is based on hyperbole and emotional appeals regarding the warming of the planet that is not based in fact. These are the policies that a President Perry would change if I could.
And Congressman, I didn't have this in my mind to discuss with you today, but you brought it up. You mentioned it, and I'm glad you did, because I'd like to go there. Larry Fink and BlackRock talk about why American citizens need to be aware of both this man and his company's mission.
Largest financer in the United States, financing all manner of different things for business, but they demand under the policies of ESG, environmental, social, and governance. ESG, so in our system, in our competitive market system, if you're a shareholder in a company, let's just say whether it's Exxon or whether it's Amazon, the expectation is those companies will maximize your shareholder value. That's the old way of doing things. And what Larry Fink has subscribed to under this ESG is stakeholder value. And one of the stakeholder values, according to them, are things like the environment, are things like social justice, and how well you play with government, in that government is in a partnership with private business. And if companies don't subscribe to that, they simply can't get financing. And this is most of the major companies in the United States of America. I don't think most people realize that, but literally they're forcing energy producers to spin off and change their companies so that they have a separate company that doesn't produce energy, because the separate company will be the only one that can receive financing. The company like, say, Exxon, that actually does exploration and production of energy, will not be able to receive financing from places like BlackRock, the largest financer in the country, maybe the largest financer in the world other than governments. They simply won't be able to receive it because Larry Fink is completely woke and has bought into this new ESG theory. Quite honestly, it's a foul of the law. We just can't get any administration to deal with it. And essentially the law is that they have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value. They are not doing that when they subscribe to ESG. But even under the Trump administration, we couldn't get Treasury, we couldn't get the SEC. No one wants to touch it because they think it's going to be too disruptive to the market. What's disruptive to the market is ESG, and what's going to be disruptive to freedom, liberty, the planet, is this whole new woke agenda that disallows America to seek its own resources and be independent of nations like Russia, China, Venezuela, and Iran. Literally, Joe Biden in the last 2 weeks has reached out to Venezuela and Iran Bakken, anywhere in Texas, North Dakota, California, Alaska. He's going to despots, dictators, and authoritarian thugs instead of coming right to the citizens of the United States.
And let me just make a comment, and you can expand to it, and then I'll lead into my question. But here's where that albatross, that ESG, Larry Fink, albatross grows heavier for America. ESG is basically the same type of policy that the World Economic Forum is putting out with its Great Reset, the switch from the shareholder capitalism to the stakeholder capitalism. Yes?
That's absolutely right. The World Economic Forum that meets in Davos, Switzerland, and the Great Reset, which tears down all sovereign nations and allegedly makes us equal from a moral standpoint, from an economic standpoint. And I will just tell you, there is no moral equivalence between the United States and Russia, between the United States, North Korea, Iran, or China, and there certainly isn't an economic equivalence, but they are trying desperately to make it so, and quite honestly, right now, I think they're succeeding.
And just to tell a little bit more, there were something like 200 businesses in the last year or two that signed on to the Business Roundtable's new mission, which again puts social justice causes above profits. Yes?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And again, social justice, when people talk about equity, equity is not equality. The United States is based on equality, based on a meritocracy. We believe all people are equal. We don't consider race, color, gender, creed, any of those things. We consider the content of your character and the equality under the law. But equity is something very different, and that's the social justice construct, which takes from you who have worked hard to pull yourself up and gives to the other person that for whatever reason might not have as much as you. That is a very, very different socialist agenda that America was set up for. Quite honestly, it actually defies the Constitution, and we need to think of it that way. We need to approach it that way.
Absolutely. So here's my final question then, because I know our time is running short. Given that what you described and what is factually accurate, that the American capitalistic system is in jeopardy right now. And it's not just from this administration, it's from global forces. What is the hope for America here? Because first off, Americans have to be educated to this ESG, Larry Fink, Great Reset that's taking place. And second off, how to effectively fight and win.
Well, the first thing is the education process, which we are long down the road of counting on our state and federal government. Federal government shouldn't even be involved in education of our children in school, but they are. But too many states and the state education systems refuse to educate anybody on these issues. And of course, most adults don't know much about them either. So it's up to members of Congress, I think, in the general discussion happening in the public space and the public square to inform people about this, and then people need to vote accordingly. Any vote for a leftist, and let me just say this, leftists are on both sides of the aisle, but any vote for a leftist who doesn't, if you're for any part of this, to me, you don't deserve a place constitutionally in office as you know, look, voters can vote for you, but you really shouldn't be there, and of course voters will vote for people that do these things and have, and that's part of our problem. But we really need to tie the policy to your own personal well-being in the way we message it and describe it, because it absolutely is true. If you don't like what's happening today based on empty store shelves, prices that are too high, over-regulation in every bit of your daily life, this is all has to do with ESG and socialist leftist policies. And if you think the Democrat Party isn't involved in this, or that, you know, John F. Kennedy represents the Democrat Party, I would almost believe at this point that John F. Kennedy would be a member of the House Freedom Caucus if he were in Congress. He would no longer be involved or invited in the Democrat Party, which doesn't exist today in the form that it was originally conceived. Bernie Sanders ran as a Democrat, but he's an avowed socialist, and there are many avowed socialists now serving in the federal legislature and state legislatures. So your vote absolutely matters. We need to, first of all, secure our election elections. Number one, there's no reason to have 2-week-long, 5-week-long voting. There's no reason to not verify who you are. There's no reason for non-citizens to be voting. These things need to be cleaned up. People need to vote and choose and select the correct candidates to echo their views and their concerns to turn this thing around. And Congress has a role in this where we can at least slow down this agenda. But the other thing is that we really have to win both the legislative branch, the presidency, and the courts for a sustained basis. And we need people of courage that are willing to stand up and say absolutely not to these things. And that's the other thing. While you can elect people that say they're conservatives, you really need to look at a record of courage, because it's one thing to say it, it's a whole other thing to do it. And we've seen in too many occasions people are absolutely willing to say it, but they're hardly willing to do it when the time comes.
Congressman Perry, I want to thank you for your courage in speaking out so bluntly. Honestly, this has to be one of the most important interviews I've done on Bold and Blunt. The info you put out is crucial. Thank you for being a guest.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and just hope that your folks be heard. That's the biggest thing I tell my bosses, my constituents, when they come to me and say, what can we do? You can be heard. Do not be afraid. Let people know what you think and stand by it. Be informed and be heard. God bless you. Thank you.
God bless. Be heard. How many times have you, as an American citizen, sat at home, watched the news, and grown furious at how you see your country being sold down the river by feckless people in the White House, by politicians with only personal ambitions, not regard for the Constitution, and wanted to say something, but were afraid, were too timid, didn't think it was your place? How about what your schools are doing to your children? Have you gone to a school board meeting and spoken up, spoken out, like some of these parents have in, say, Loudoun County, Virginia? If not, why not? If you're angry about something, if you're upset, let's remember here in America, who's the boss? It's you, the taxpayer. Politicians, bureaucrats, they're the public service class. They work for the American citizenry. So keep that in mind. And as House Freedom Caucus Chairman, Congressman Scott Perry reminds, speak out. Get your voice going. If you like Bold and Blunt, please subscribe. Go to edify.app/podcast. Find it there. That is the platform for faith-based podcasts, or WashingtonTimes.com. And don't forget, I have a new book coming out this April, Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Pre-order now. I sure would appreciate your support. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time. And in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.